This is question 10, where we left off, and Don is asking, it seems though that in the case of many UFO contacts that have occurred on this planet, that there must be some knowledge and use of first distortion, in that the fourth density entities have carefully remained aloof and anonymous, you might say, for the most part, so that no proof in a concrete way of their existence is too obvious. How are they oriented with respect to this type of contact? So before I get into this answer, even from last session, from last episode, I should say, there was an interest in Don into understanding how the negative polarity uses free will or respects free will, the law of free will. So I mentioned in the last episode that this wasn't a question that was answered properly by Rob because they didn't quite understand it or answer something different. So that's why Don is going to continue asking about this first distortion that he mentions here, but the first distortion is free will. So just keep that in mind. And here he's talking about this approach that the negative entity has, that he's mentioning UFO contacts, which it's one way to talk about negative contact, but that's not entirely everything. I mean, negative contact is mainly just like positive contact through telepathic means, or simply as ways of informing the mind. You see, the temptations or the inspirations come as your own thoughts. You think they are your own thoughts, but they're just influences. So negative contact as UFOs, I have explained in the past how I believe this is it, and how Ra explains it, which is, again, it's like a dream. A dream happens. Does it really happen, or does it happen in your mind? Dreams are obvious. That answer is obvious. But with UFO contact, not so much, because it seems to be in the wakened state that we see them. But it seems to be that they are of the mind, at least the ones that are from other dimensions. That makes a lot of sense, because if not, we would be talking about third density phenomenon. So if we're talking about third density phenomenon, then they're not truly fourth density or fifth density or even sixth density contact. That would be something from purely telepathic. I have covered that extensively, so I won't go into details here, but just to keep that in mind. And so the fourth density entities have carefully remained aloof and anonymous. Of course, they don't present themselves. Ra has explained that for them to manifest physically, it would require a tremendous amount of energy and willpower to do this, and it's not efficient. Why would they want to do that when they can influence directly through the mind? That's the nature of higher densities, you see. And so there's no proof in concrete way of their existence is too obvious. Okay, so how are they oriented with respect to this contact? And again, I think Ra doesn't fully get the question here, even though they say, we misperceive your query thinking it was directed towards this particular type of contact. The nature of the four densities' observance of the free will distortion while pursuing the seeding of the third density thought patterns is material that has already been covered. That which can be offered of the negatively oriented information is offered. It is altered to the extent that the entity receiving such negative information is of positive orientation. Thus, many such contacts are of a mixed nature. So Don is going to continue asking here because he doesn't get the answer that he wants, but let's cover what Ross said as a way of refresher, I suppose. So we have talked about this previously, as Ross says, in many sessions. There are some notations here if you're interested in the raw contact, which thankfully they listed, and this is from session 11, 12, 16, 26, 62, 67 and 68, this is where this type of conversation of how contact is done is covered, and I won't go into all of those details, of course, but just wanted to mention it to you. You can go into session 87 in lawofone.info and see all the references. You can actually see it in LML research as well, but I mainly use lawofone.info. In any case, so we have the way in which they establish contact, negative entities, and that is through the offering of temptations, the alluring into the service to self path. So in practice, this is seen as aggrandizing the ego, because if we go down to basics, humans have naturally two tendencies. One is to increase their ego. Two is to want to dissolve their ego, which is a very crude way to say we either want to increase the feeling and the perception of separation, or we want to dissolve into this natural feeling of unity, of caring and loving and being compassionate with each other. And so these are two moral paths, shall we say, that are present in third density and, of course, on Earth, the human experience. So other dimensions are trying to enhance these two paths, positive and negative. And so in the negative, what they're doing is, Ra says, that which can be offered of the negatively oriented information is offered, whatever it is available for temptations into aggrandizing the ego or increase, both are the same thing, increase the perception of separation, and thus all the attitudes and behaviors that are associated with preserving myself and manipulating others and using and creating power structures and so on, which we are, I'm going to say, blessed that we have these choices very blatant in our society. We can see them as the structures of power, as well as the structures of being generous and being compassionate and helping each other and so forth. So these two paths are already quite obvious in our societal structure. It's not something that we're talking about, something obscure that is not out there. It's very obvious. And then Ra finishes with something that is it's something really important to keep in mind. They say it is altered to the extent that the information is that the entity receiving such negative information is of positive orientation. So they like to offer this to positive entities because this is something that reduces their polarity, and reduces their polarity as what should I call it? As positive polarity, right? And so we have that to be added to the negative one. So the positive, this is the nature, as they say, of mixed contexts, in which you see a lot of great channelings with positive information and so forth, but what you see from here and there is a little tainted part of the message for fear, or to increase the ego, or to want to give you this sense of one teaching, one way to do things. There's always a little hint in the positive message of certain contexts, and so that's something to keep in mind. The negative needs to be present at some point, and that is a good thing because we can discern. It's not something to be afraid of, but something that it's teaching us, and it's showing us, what's not the right path. This needs to be this way.